Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, the Bay Area's premier author interview program. And today we're going to talk about a book which is on one of my favorite things, baseball, but it's on baseball in a very different way. The book is called The Empire Strikes Out. The subtitle, How Baseball Sold U.S. Foreign Policy and Promoted the American Way Abroad. The author is Robert Elias. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
One of the other interesting things about this book is it's published by something called the New Press.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, the New Press was started about, I guess it's 20 years ago in New York, where it still is, by Andre Schifrin, who decided that he wanted to set up a new publishing house that would be more in the public interest, looking at public issues.
Mm-hmm.
And he did so successfully. It's been going now. It's a nonprofit, but still succeeding in a tough world. It's a tough business to survive.
And it's really, I would guess, one of the few houses that would take on this book, because this book is, way out there in a way. I mean, it's talking about, quote, the national pastime, in talking about it as to how it relates to American history and American foreign policy, and some of the things you say about it are not too complimentary.
Yes, well, that's true. So you might be right about that. As it turns out, I don't think I realized it, but I took on a couple of sacred cows. One of them was baseball, and the other is U.S. foreign policy, and I foolishly took on both. So you might be right about that. Yes.
Welcome to Conversations on the Coast. We love people who are uncomfortable. Now, you teach at the University of San Francisco in the area of law and politics, and this isn't your first baseball book. A previous book is Baseball and the American Dream.
Yes. And
a baseball novel. I love the title, The Deadly Tools of Ignorance.
Yes, it's a murder mystery.
Yay. And the other baseball books? Just three? Huh?
Just those three, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, the thing that's interesting about the book is that you speak of the national pastime and its relationship to American empire, and you cover this from George Washington to Bud Selig.
Unlikely.
Were you sick when you decided to do this? This is an amazing scope.
I wasn't thinking of, yeah. It is an amazing scope, but that's one of the things that's beautiful about baseball. It's one of our oldest institutions. I've been teaching a course on baseball and the American Dream at USF for about 15 years now.
Uh-huh.
And the focus has been mainly on U.S. society, U.S. history, U.S. politics. And really, you can use baseball as a lens or a mirror on society, going back to essentially the earliest days of the country. And it's a very interesting lens because you can look at race relations, labor management relations, social issues such as gambling and drug abuse, and so on and so forth. So the departure I made here with this book is that I tried to look at baseball outside the U.S.
Uh-huh.
How does it connect to U.S. foreign policy and not just U.S. domestic issues?
One of the phrases you use, I think early on, is national pastime trade-off.
Yes.
What are you trying to get at there?
Well, baseball has always sought to keep its national pastime status, and this is something that's more than simply a symbolic designation. It may surprise your listeners to know that baseball has had this designation at least since 1857, so even before the Civil War. And what it gets is it gets to associate itself with everything that's good about America. It's the American game. So it means profits. It means popularity of the game. But it also means, as it turns out, an exemption from our antitrust laws.
Aha. That's key.
And it was key, yes. In 1922, the Supreme Court decided a case. The judgment was rendered by Oliver Wendell Holmes, and it said that, well, baseball looks like a business. They are operating across state lines and would apparently be covered by the antitrust laws, but we're going to exempt it. Why? Because it's the national pastime. So it's been very important to try to hold on to that designation.
Sounds like a circular argument to
me. It is a circular argument.
Now, that argument was altered, challenged in a recent ruling by the current Supreme Court. having to do with the paraphernalia, fans' paraphernalia.
Yes, there have been certain areas where the antitrust laws do take effect. But as far as the main operating activities of the business, it's still exempt.
It's still exempt,
right.
Yeah.
It's exempt. It has rescinded its exemption on certain labor issues as well. But that's a moot issue because that was taken care of by the free agency decisions in the 1970s anyway.
I see. Well, you do get at this baseball in America very early. You quote somebody who talks about George Washington playing catch for hours on end.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Who would have thought of that?
No, you wouldn't have. And the soldiers at Valley Forge. And really in virtually every war and every military intervention, baseball shows up. It's really hard to find some military policy where baseball is not involved in some way or another. And
as early as Walt Whitman, the thing that you're covering in this book kind of comes to the fore. Whitman writes, baseball is spreading. It spreads the American atmosphere to Australia, Asia, Africa, and Europe. Baseball becomes entwined with the mission of America to expand and spread its form of government.
Beautiful, isn't it? Because that really encapsulates.
He knows, I mean, this is early on. This would be 19th century.
Very early on, yes. Yeah. And it's a kind of prediction of America going abroad, and baseball helps to sell the American way abroad.
It's amazing. That's very early. Well, we have a lot to cover here, but, I want to stop because one of the great virtues of The Empire Strikes Back is that it introduces us to unique individuals. And it also, in several respects, sets the record straight. We'll do all that and more when we come back. The Empire Strikes Out. How Baseball Sold U.S. Foreign Policy and Promoted the American Way Abroad. That's today's book. The author is Robert Elias, the publisher, The New Press. And a guy who made a lot of money on at least one baseball book. Loves your book, Mr. Roger Kahn, the author of The Boys of Summer, The Era, and October Men.
Yes, I'm fortunate. One of the luminaries in baseball writing.
Or the Boys of the Summer. That we can call that a classic.
It is a classic.
It's a classic. The Empire Strikes Out, he says, is a rare and wonderful combination of splendid scholarship and lively writing. Robert Elias's affection for baseball illuminates its pages, even when he is unearthing episodes of organized baseball's racism, jingoism, unbridled militarism, and insensitivity to other cultures. You don't sound like any friend of baseball. Simultaneously and gracefully, the book describes the development of baseball and its impact overseas as a sort of quasi-instrument of American foreign policy. The recent internationalization of Major League rosters makes the book particularly timely, a truly fine work, and I highly recommend it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. By the way, I do love baseball. That's why I wrote the book.
I know you do. I was making fun. One of the things that he mentions here is the internationalization of Major League rosters. Do you think that that's going to balance the scales in terms of, if you will, the colonization that went on before about baseball in places like Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic, et cetera?
Well, there's a particular reason why there's been a big influx of Latino and Caribbean ball players, and that is that they're outside the international draft. And that means that they're not subject to the rules and regulations of the regular U.S. draft. They don't have access, for the most part, to agents. They can be signed at very early ages, and the key is for very little money. So you have stars, recent stars like Sammy Sosa and Miguel Tejada being signed for $2,000 to $4,000. So they can sign, Major Leagues can sign these folks by the hundreds, and even if only one or two works out, it's an enormously profitable investment. So as you begin to to see African Americans going down in terms of the percentage of major leaguers, the Latinos began to go up, and it's creating a tension actually between the two groups. And also, there's been a decline of whites as well to a small extent. So the influx, you might say, looks progressive in the sense that it's making it a more diverse group of people playing the game. But on the other hand, if you look underneath it, it isn't as pleasant a story, because it's really taking advantage of people who don't have real protections, who are looking for even a small amount of money, and might be exploited as a result.
In a sense, the colonization goes on.
Yes.
That kind of. I mean, I had no idea that they were not part of the draft.
No, they're not. There's just a U.S. draft which covers just the United States and Puerto Rico, but everything else is outside of that.
Let's get to the business of setting the record straight, which you do here beautifully in a couple of instances. And the first one is Abner Doubleday. Abner did not invent baseball. In fact, you say baseball invented Abner Doubleday,
exactly.
And he never played the game.
No, so far as we know, he did not play the game. No, and actually, I'm not the discoverer of that tidbit. But what I try to do in the book is to show that there were a couple of reasons why he was chosen. And one has to do with the theme of my book. One reason was that America was still suffering a kind of inferiority complex to Great Britain, even as late as the late 1800s and early 1900s. Mm-hmm. And it wanted to show that it had a uniquely American game. And there was a theory going around that actually baseball was just a knockoff of rounders.
Yeah.
Okay, the old British game. And we just couldn't take that. It wasn't going to work. And then in addition to that, could you associate it with not just any American, but with someone who was an important American? And Abner Doubleday was a military general. He was a hero of the Mexican, Indian, and Civil Wars.
Very, very successful general.
And that's where my theme comes in, and that is baseball has always tried to associate itself with the military. And here it invented someone who is a military hero as the inventor of its game.
What could be more American?
So it started there. Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Yes.
It's really patriotism as a marketing tool.
Moses Fleetwood Walker.
Yes.
That name important to you?
Very important. Yes, he was apparently the first, we're not entirely sure, but certainly the last African American to play baseball before the color barrier was imposed. So it's actually a misconception that Jackie Robinson was the first African American to play in the major leagues. Walker played in the major leagues in the 1880s. Was very good, very well educated man, very accomplished man.
Yeah, Oberlin College grad.
Yeah, and University of Michigan. And Walker was run out of the game, just like other African Americans were. Around the time when Jim Crow laws were being set up, the Supreme Court, in its Plessy versus Ferguson case, was endorsing this, separate but equal. And so the two went in different directions. You had the Negro Leagues develop on the one hand, and the major leagues went in another direction until Jackie Robinson.
Makes you ask the question, in a way, who won the Civil War? Absolutely. Because if it was supposedly fought to free the black or the African Americans, it didn't succeed. Because
that's right. And we see this generally in American society, but baseball provides a microcosm of that. You can see it playing out in baseball. And to baseball's credit, I mean, on the other hand, it was one of the first institutions to overcome the color barrier.
That's interesting, yeah. Well, baseball is good and bad and beautiful. It's a great, great game. The Empire Strikes Out concludes with what I think is a very disturbing final chapter, and we're going to look at that when we return. Robert Elias has written an extremely unusual and important book about my favorite sport, baseball, the national pastime. The title of the book is The Empire Strikes Out: How Baseball Sold U.S. Foreign Policy and Promoted the American Way Abroad. And a gentleman by the name of Dave Zirin, author of A People's History of Sports in the United States, says in part, sports have always been ripe for exploitation by those who would pump the politics of militarism through play. No one has ever broken down the history of this process in baseball, like Robert Elias. The Empire Strikes Out should be required reading for anyone who considers themselves a baseball fan, or for anyone who has opposed the military misadventures of the past decade. It is an unqualified triumph, and it's well written. I mean, despite the fact that it's history.
You know, oh, no, not that.
Well, no, history's not that easily to write in a good, swinging kind of way. And,
thank you. I try to tell some
really
stories, and I think if you do that, it makes it flow a little bit better.
Well, before we get to that last chapter, got to tell us the story of Moe Berg, a guy who fielded well and couldn't hit a lick.
Yes, in fact, that phrase was invented to describe Moe Berg. Good field, no hit.
Good field, no hit, Moe Berg. But he had other talent.
He did. Yeah, Moe Berg was initially a shortstop, then he became a catcher, and that's what made him valuable in baseball because he wasn't
third string catcher, please, or second, at least second.
At least second.
Right.
At least second. He was a good backup. He played for 3 major league teams. Played for 15 years. And it's a little surprising that he lasted that long, although, there is some value in having a backup catcher. Anyway, the bottom line is that Moe Berg had another profession. He was an American spy. And he had sort of 2 careers in that realm. One was before World War II, and he was involved with a number of the tours that baseball teams and organizations took to Japan. And while he was there, and people did wonder a little why he was there, because everyone else on the teams were stars, and he was not. But Moe Berg was extremely brilliant. He spoke Japanese and allegedly 11 other languages. He went to Princeton and to Columbia and the Sorbonne. And he was able to converse with the Japanese in their own language, so that made him valuable. But while he was there, he was spying. He was taking photos of sensitive military installations of downtown Tokyo and other things that became valuable to the U.S. when World War II broke out.
Yeah.
And then after the war, he was working in Latin America for the State Department and the CIA. Spying on their activities, trying to see what links they had to certain European powers. And he also was sent to Europe to try to investigate how far along, this is during the war, how far along the Germans were in their atomic bomb program. And in fact, he was given a gun and a cyanide pill and was told that he should assassinate Werner Heisenberg if it was clear that the Germans were on their way, and he would have been a key figure, so get him out of the way. And Moe Berg determined that the Germans were not that far along.
And he didn't have to assassinate.
So he did not, and yes, that's right. So he, and then he went on, he went to Italy, and he got out some top Italian scientists, and so he had a pretty interesting career.
If I wanted to see a couple of Moe Berg's baseball cards, where is one place I could go?
To the lobby of the CIA in Virginia.
CIA.
Yes. Yes, it's...
Oh, I love Moe.
Yeah, actually, I have not actually seen that. I really should go and see that, but that's where there are some cards.
I'm going to tell the audience one other thing. There is a footnote on Moe Berg in this book, which is funnier than anything that we've just talked about. And if you want to know what's in it, buy the book. The last chapter is called The Empire Strikes Back. And it begins this way, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting. Both the nation-state empire of America and the baseball empire, MLB, have a very tentative hold on their futures and are more vulnerable than ever before. That's the way you start this chapter. And you talk about how America's imperial ambitions and baseball have worked together, and the future is not good because of how you or one of the people you quote sees the present. And there's a recitative there of our faults that's really mind-blowing.
Right. Well, for most of the book, I tried to keep my opinions out of telling the history, but in the end, I thought it was important to try to reflect on what this might mean. Some people bristle when you talk about America as an empire, but really by any reasonable definition, it is an empire.
Yeah.
And whether it's an empire that is succeeding at this point is a little hard to tell. I mean, at the very least, it's debatable. And I'm not sure that it is. I think most of the empire is based on its military activities, and I think that much of that is not succeeding. And the baseball connection here is that baseball has allied itself so much with U.S. foreign and military policies that I'm concerned about its continued linkage as something that's going to sink baseball, along with what might not be very bright prospects for the country itself.
What are the people you quote talk about? It talks about within a short time, the nation, us, will be marginalized. That's a heck of a that's Morris Berman, I guess, who says that.
Right. Well, it's interesting that The Economist about 20 years ago did a story reflecting on the future of America, and they were reflecting on their remembrance of Britain when it was in decline, and
Yes.
No one in Britain actually realized that it was in decline. I think we have something perhaps similar going on here. So I think the baseball needs to think more about its own independence.
Well, this book will make you think a lot. It will also entertain you like crazy. The Empire Strikes Out. It's written by Robert Elias, and this has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.